And this is why sometimes in the industries where clients don't really know what they're talking about, people with higher prices and lower skill sets do better than the other way around.
Isn't that an awful reality?
Yeah.
This is the Fearless Pricing Podcast, where we meet and talk about real life pricing experience. I'm your host, Filip Fucic.
Pricing is hard. This is a podcast for fearless professionals and those who would like to feel that way. It's an unfortunate truth that most service pricing is created using either guesswork or copying other people's guesswork. Hello, and welcome back to the Fearless Pricing Podcast. My name is Filip Fucic, and today we have our lovely guest, Jane Vandermeer, a multi award winning global expert personal stylist, engaging speaker, and author, trainer, and innovative thought leader. Jane has always had a love for high end fashion. You could say that it's in her blood. As a creative and entrepreneurial thinker, Jane has a 30-year career within the fashion industry and is an innovative personal stylist who elevates women in business with purpose. Jane, welcome to the What I Should Have Charged.
Thank you so much for having me today, Philip. It's a thrill to be here. I went to university to become a fashion designer, and before I even finished university, I'd started that business. So it was what we call made to order in fashion. So ladies would come in and order. I might have some samples, and they would order something specifically designed for them. So they're buying something they cannot see, and there's 9 times out of 10 there's not a tangible sample for them. They're buying the design process, and I might source fabric and they have fittings. So it's a really, as much as anything, it's the experience of the process. So I would then work out my pricing structure, of course, up front. And, when I was 20, 21 at that time, a lot less assertive, a lot learning by the seat of my pants. And the thing when you are making something to go around a human body, there's a lot of variables and there's a lot of steps in the process where pricing can really blow out and double. And if it doubles in sort of, say, 8 steps along the way, it can really, really skyrocket really quickly. Or to give you an example, if I was making a wedding dress for a girl, which I made lots and lots of wedding dresses in my life, I remember 2 weeks before the wedding, so the gown is almost finished and I had hand beaded, like all hand work. And she said, "Jane, I'm so excited. I've just lost 5 kilos." And I said, "What are you doing that for, like, now? We needed that 3 months ago, not like 2 weeks before your wedding." She was excited, and I just thought, wow. So I actually had to remake the entire, and the bodice is all fitted, and there were hours and hours and hours and hours worth of work in there. And so I was faced with the decision at that point. And of course, this is her dream. I'm making her dream come true and all this kind of thing. But really, what I wanted to say is actually, I nearly could double the price of the gown now because I almost have to start, not quite from scratch, but almost. And so it's very, very difficult. And of course, so what, I didn't do anything. I fixed the dress and remade it, did it all over again. It looked beautiful. She was really happy, which is wonderful. So happy client. But of course, I still paid my team for double the amount of work. And so I barely covered costs on it. And it was a really, heartbreaking decision. Wedding dresses we work on for a lot of months, not every day, but you work on it over a long time. So I learned a lot from that experience. Actually, what I did do is say, if it's your aim to lose weight, you don't have to. You're beautiful the way you are. But if you're going to lose weight, this is the deadline.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds possibly completely inappropriate, but with bridal, that's what happens. That's what girls do. So if
Mhm.
at least if I give them timelines to work towards moving forward, it was a much better experience. It does happen a lot when they're buying something they can't see and I've never made before. So even if I made you something one month, but a whole new fabric the next month, that fabric might behave differently. It might need two more fittings. I haven't factored in those prices. Really tricky. Really tricky.
What you described
Mm,
is something that is often called a quiet discount.
mm,
You didn't give her a discount
no,
out loud.
no.
However, on you gave her a 50% discount, let's say for real, right?
Mm,
Judging how you usually set the price. If you knew what you know now,
yep.
the price that she ended up paying would have been a significant, probably ruinous discount,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And
yes.
you never say anything, and this
No,
is why it's called the quiet discount. This is completely normal. You never want to surprise the client with a higher price,
no,
so
no.
those things can happen. And
Yes,
I think, looking back, if you had to go back to that business for any
yep,
imaginary reason, you could say, look, this is what happens sometimes, and if
yes,
it
yeah,
does happen, then
yeah,
these are the consequences
yeah,
that that
absolutely.
I simply cannot stop. And then
Mm,
if this happens, then they say, oh, well, I was warned. This is not
mm,
a higher
mm,
price now. This is the same deal under new
mm.
consequences as prearranged, because now you
Yes,
have this, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
if she ended up paying the same for any reason, she would have known she had a discount. So
yes.
quiet discounts are very, very, very common,
Are they?
even more. Yes,
Yeah,
even more common with women, because we don't
yeah.
expect women to be confrontational.
Mm,
It's self-silencing. um,
mm,
I'm not saying this is just typical for women, but it's more common with
yeah.
women who
And
set
I
the price.
wonder if also, Philip, it's female and being a creative.
Oh
'Cause
yeah,
I
both.
think in the creative
Yeah,
industry,
yeah.
having been in it and, I've taught and I've been around creatives my whole career, that
Mhm.
we don't always value our skills in the same way that, like, a lawyer would or an accountant would or it.
Don't get me wrong, accountants give quiet discounts as well.
Yeah, right.
I'm
Yeah.
not that sure for lawyers typically, but accountants do. It's not just for the creatives,
Yeah,
but
right.
there is something about doing a job that you like doing
Yes.
that
Yes.
ends up getting you to question whether it's okay to charge something for this. So if you
Mm,
had to do the extra work,
mm,
but it gave you a rush,
mm,
isn't that enough? And the answer is no.
mhm. The rush doesn't pay the bank or the electricity company or whatever, does it?
Yes.
Like, it's wonderful because it feeds your soul, and that's wonderful, but yes.
Oh, but yes, but that can be extra.
Mm,
It's okay to feed your soul and your
mm,
family at the same time.
mm,
It's not the same currency, so you can do both, right? But when you're in a bad situation, when you're in the middle of a client
mm,
engagement,
mm.
and you know that additional work should,
Yeah.
is in order, in order
Yes.
to do this,
Yeah.
especially when we're young and we're trying to do the best thing, and we're not even sure if we should be charging for this or charging for that. Maybe
Mhm,
that was my mistake for not
mhm,
recognizing that I'm going to need 4 hours
mm.
more. Then it's basically a balancing act between integrity and good old desperation.
Yeah.
uh,
Spot on. And good old desperation, when it's tied.
good old.
I think it happens a lot with creatives too. I think creatives, we can err on that side, because I've taught at university fashion business a lot too, and I see it through our industry. There is a lack of self-worth for our
Mhm.
skills, and so we discount or we lower our price. We don't value it enough, and then we get caught where, exactly my example, And you can't say to the client, by the way, that should be 50% or 100% more expensive than what I've charged you.
Because
To,
maybe you can't afford to pay your team unless you charge this.
correct,
But if you
correct.
do charge this, then you're not going to be having a happy client.
Mm,
So desperation pushes you toward
mm.
being more fair to yourself, but seeming less professional to the client. Before we continue, I'd like to suggest two things. Firstly, if this is the first time you're tuning in, I'd love for you to subscribe and hear the next story in a week. And second, if you feel you could do with a little more fearless pricing content, look in the show notes for the link to the popular, short, and sometimes funny biweekly newsletter. That's it. Let's get back to the show.
And if you do that, there's a big possibility that client will never come back again, of course, depending on how you handle it. Like, they might pay it.
Mhm.
We've all been on the receiving end where you're told, actually, it's cost a lot more because of A, B, and C. And I think it all boils down to communication beforehand, the obvious beforehand. These are the parameters. This is what can increase the cost. Even as much, like, an example is women. Because I did work a little bit with men, but mainly women, because they couldn't visualize something. If people, lots of people can't visualize until they see it. And then when something was tangible along that process and it looked different to what they had imagined,
Mhm.
that happens. Your interpretation, mine, can be a little bit different. And then they can change their mind and change direction. It's a little bit like
Mhm.
building a house. It's sort of the same thing, isn't it? And then suddenly we see the walls painted with the color that you and I've agreed to, but actually we go, oh, it's just different to what I thought. I don't like it anymore. I think I've got to change it. Who foots the bill? So that needs to be factored in somewhere in there.
I think the correct answer to that is the one who initiated the change foots the bill. So there's
Yes.
consequences to changes,
Yes.
and even it may not be a matter of fault, but it is a matter of duty.
Yeah.
It's yeah,
Well, it's consequences of a decision, isn't it? You're
yeah,
right. It, and
exactly.
if
Even if
and
that
like,
decision is purely emotional, I like this, I don't like this,
yeah,
there's still consequences, right?
that's
Like dramatic example, you're
yeah,
making a dress, and at the last moment, the bride finds out that her fiance was not faithful to her, and she cancels off the wedding, and now she doesn't need the dress anymore. Yes, okay,
that
but
happened to me 2 weeks before the wedding. 2 weeks.
did she pay for the dress?
So that is the point of me saying this. That I always had installments along the way. So no, is the short answer is no, the dress was not fully paid for, but it was completed from my end. So my learning from that is, by about the 2-week mark, final payment has to be done. But the cute end to that example is we called it off, the
Hmm.
guy, a year later. So she took the dress. A year later, she came back and she said, "Can you change it a bit, make it the skirt a different shape?" I said, "Yeah, okay." I said, "Are you getting married?" And she said, "Yes." So to the same man. And so 25 years later, she still follows me and she comments on everything I do, because I can hold my head high how I handled her, even though it was a tough experience. And of course, you know, the emotion side, her life
Yeah.
fell apart. Her life fell apart. But yeah, that's part of bridal, I will say. Mm,
With experience, you can now know that a part of the price that you need to charge for a dress is in the materials and the work,
mm,
and part of
mm,
it is in the risk,
mm, mm,
because every 5, 10, 20, there's going to be some trouble with it.
mhm,
And one of the things that I try to both implement and teach is that if you have a business, not every client needs to be perfectly profitable, as long as at the end of the year it's a good year.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can eat a loss so that you
Yes. Yes.
maintain your
Yes.
professional. But that means that you need to charge everybody a risk premium
Yeah.
in order to be able to
Yeah.
just professionally, coolly say, doesn't matter, we'll still go through with this, and then the client is happy, and then you get
Mm,
referrals and all work out. Of course, if your finances allow this, there doesn't have to be a panic about,
mm,
oh, I'm not going to be able to charge for these 5 hours unless
mm,
I
mm,
conduct myself in a less than professional way. It's fine. I'm going to lose on these 5 hours here, but
mm,
everybody pays like a 20% premium that
mm,
they don't have to be conscious of it. We don't want to put it on the bill, right? There's a risk premium. Usually people don't really even care about the itemization. So if I got a bill for a wedding dress, I wouldn't go looking for cutting is this much and
mm,
then design
mm,
is that much. No, it's just how much is the dress. You go to a restaurant, you get
yeah.
uh,
You just
a,
want
a
somebody
bill
to.
that says, spaghetti and wine and cake. You don't get 20 grams of flour and 3 grams
Mm.
of salt on it. How much do your clients understand the formula of how your price is formulated, built?
So back then, when it was made to order a product, I suppose you get all kinds of personalities. Some people want it highly detailed, and others, like the example you've just given, is just tell me the punchline and that's fine, and I'll either go ahead or I won't go ahead. Majority didn't care and didn't want, like, they didn't really care whether I spent 15 hours on it or 25 or 40 hours on it. They just want their pretty dress and they want to look like a princess, and that's it. Yeah, it's all about education, because if they are comparing a made to order compared to what they call off the rack, so walking into a shop and buying something off the rack, it's never going to be like for like, because the general public, if they've never had something made, and that is actually the constant battle, they'd say, but I can buy it for $1,000 in that shop. Why is it $2,000 at yours?
Mhm. So what's your answer?
Explain the process and
Mhm.
why. And then the variables are, you can choose inexpensive fabric. You might need 6 meters, it's $30 a meter, or you can choose $1,000 a meter fabric, and we still need 6 meters. So therefore, that's
Mhm.
what your dress is going to work out as, your decision. And give
Mhm.
them the options. And then the lady would go, oh, yes, I want the $8,000 version, or no, that's too much for me. The $4,000 version's more my budget. So I would give them the options, and then, because that places the power in their hands.
So in your professional experience, why do people opt for 2 times, 3 times, 6 times the price that they could get from the ready-made
Yeah,
off the rack thing?
there's probably a couple of reasons. One is the uniqueness. So girls knowing that they will never see a copy somewhere else. Individuality. So there's that. There's also having something that fits you perfectly, and particularly if you're not a stock size, or if you're not an off the rack proportions,
Hmm.
and you want to hide areas or minimize certain parts, or whatever your issue is, if it's made to order, we can do a fair bit of magic there and make all that happen. But that all has to be built around accommodating for you. And off the rack, that's, you either try it on, and you either take it or leave it.
Hmm. Hit or miss.
Yeah, and the other really panders to your every whim almost.
Hmm.
And for some women, for that, like for a big event like that, that's what they want. They want to be treated, and everything they've ever wanted, everyone runs around them and does for them.
Right. Similar question, but to more closer to what you do now. People can get I'm
Yep.
I'm, I'm going to say it in a banal way, fashion advice,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Everywhere. There's
Yes. Would you
literally
do it? Yep. You could do buy a book.
countless.
Yep.
Yeah. So why does somebody, and I understand that there are very good reasons. I'm just
Yes.
wondering how you would say it.
Yeah.
Why do people say, okay, there's all of this free stuff and
Yes.
there's an expert and I'm going to go with the expert. So
Yes.
in your industry, how does that
Yes.
thought process go?
I would flip it around to you and
Go.
say, we could buy a book on pricing
Hmm.
and we'd read it and we'd go, yeah, that's good. Yep. Come back to that. Or, no, it doesn't feel right. Or, yeah, I just don't know where to start. I'm overwhelmed. It's too much. I don't know where to start. And I think I know styling comes in the same way with women's bodies and our budgets, our lifestyles, our ingrained self-worth, our what we've grown up to believe and what we spend on things. So, like one person, a $200 pair of shoes is extremely expensive. The next person, $1,000 pair of shoes is a great deal. So, like that is very that can different be so different for all of us. So, I think combine all of those moving parts, and then to have me with 30 odd years experience, I can then say, okay, I want you to read this, follow this, do this, and then check in with me. And that is how I find real change happens. People implement everything in between my sessions. And I think then it's also tailored to, or how I work is I would tailor it to your specific requirements. And I think that is the difference. Most people aren't self-starters enough or don't know how to implement or get too much information, and I call it almost analysis paralysis, and then you do nothing because it's overwhelming and you don't know where to start, and then your self-talk's pretty bad, and it sort of all gets too much.
And also trying things out is
Mm,
expensive both in the literal sense. So,
yeah.
okay, maybe I just buy a really expensive brand of shirts, whatever. And maybe that doesn't work and that was expensive. But also, and I think even more so, it's expensive socially. It's expensive of okay, and what if I look ridiculous in this? This is what contributes to analysis paralysis. I find that when it's about confidence, and you pointed out there's some similarities between our fields there. Pricing is about confidence,
Yes, it is.
very
I
very much.
remember when we first spoke, the first day we spoke. Yes, yes.
Clients tend to not even want an expert's advice on whatever
Yeah.
unless they don't feel like they can handle it. If they feel like they can handle it, they're
Mhm.
not going to pay for experts advice at all. Not a lot or a little at all. And you've seen people which have completely undeserved confidence in their styling.
Yes.
They have a problem, but they're never going to pay you because their confidence tells them, for whatever the reason, that they've got this. However, once this is undermined for whatever good or bad reason, now they don't feel like their confidence can lead them high enough to solve the problem, and now they want an expert. And when they do realize that they want an expert, they also want an expert whose confidence is way higher than theirs.
That is so
So
true.
what people do wrong, in my opinion, very often,
Mm.
that they say, I'm going to be the friendly priced expert, and that reads to people who can't see your skill level, they can just see your price. That reads as if you don't have a lot of confidence. And this is why sometimes in the industries where clients don't really know what they're talking about, people with higher prices and lower skill sets do better than the other way around.
Isn't that an awful reality?
Yes.
Awful.
I've been called the purveyor of unfortunate truths. And I cherish that title, although I'm not entirely sure it was a compliment. But this is how it works. This is how it works.
I know you're right though, Philip. You're absolutely right. There's so many people out there, and you see this especially with social media.
Oh, yeah.
They sound convincing and super confident, and they are going to change your life in whatever field they're in.
Hmm.
And if you dig deep, they may or may not have some credentials there, but they sound convincing.
Especially if you take the price into the consideration. The price is very much a part of your brand. And the same dress, if you saw it in two different lifetimes, in two different alternate realities, and so you know your dresses. But if you didn't know exactly, oh well, yes, this is plastic, and this is some high end fabric. It's a dress. It's a pretty dress. So it's just, is it a pretty dress or not a pretty dress, right? And in one reality, it's $2,000, and in the other, it's 12. You wouldn't see it as the same dress.
No, you wouldn't. No, perceived value.
It,
Yes,
it
that's so true.
This is why when you're designing a price, it's very important to go through the cost considerations. Yes, but that's not where it ends. I usually say, once you're done with the calculations, with 100% of calculations, you're done with 15% of price setting. There's so many more considerations that you have to take in before you can actually say that you decide, that you decided on a price. And especially, and this is one of the first things that you said today, especially if you're working in a field where people cannot really see the end result. And with services, this is more often true than not. At least with dressmaking, at least with styling, you have a before and after that you can show.
True, true. Yeah.
With me, that's the same. I can show people before and after prices. But
Yes.
with most expertise-based services like coaching, like consulting,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
legal advice, or CPAs, or even, yeah, like programming, design is, yeah,
Yeah.
there's an
Yeah.
after that you
Yeah.
can show,
Mm.
although it lacks context. But
Mm.
there's very often cases where there's nothing that you can show them in advance. It's just
Mhm.
about trust.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
It's best if we think of ourselves as selling completely opaque things with a clear price, because this is more often going to be the truth than the other way around. These days, you work with individuals, you work one on one.
I do.
How, how,
Yes.
how does it work?
Yes, I do work one on one, which I love actually. I was working in a group situation. I was telling someone yesterday, and I was telling her, one of the last ladies in the group said, Jane, I don't care about everyone else in the group. I just want to know about me. And I thought, actually, I understand that. She didn't say it in front of the others, but I thought, yeah, fair enough. You're busy. You just want to know A, B, and C and avoid da 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 da. And so from that point onwards, I thought, right, back to one on one. And so that's what I do. So I work globally with beautiful women all over the world who are ready to be, there's this real movement I can feel of women standing up and speaking up more and being more visible when they have perhaps felt more wobbly and less confident about doing that. And so I play a part in doing that. And I'm proud to say I help women in that way. And because when women feel confident, our relationships are impacted with our partners, our families, and our communities. And that's a big impact when women are feeling better about themselves. And so if I can play a part, and that's what I do.
This is a big shift from making physical things.
It is.
So what's different in your pricing today than it was back in the day from when you
Yeah,
told us the story? What's the main shift from making things to
a sort of
giving
scale.
advice?
There's been a big gap in time, therefore maturity, wisdom, and life experience. I would also add in knowing my worth, charging my worth, knowing that there's 30 years of experience coming now. Whereas, 20 years ago, I was still finding my feet, finding my way. I had the qualifications, but less life experience. Being a bit heart based and a heart driven, I want to help everybody. And actually, you can't help everybody. Love to say you can, but you can't. So, working out who my client is and then doing a really good job with that group of people. I think as time's gone on,
Hmm.
my own confidence with being able to say that with a smile and say, you know what, we're perhaps not suited as well, but I can recommend someone who is, who'd be better
Hmm.
fit for
Yes.
you, or something like that. And it takes confidence to, even if you could do with the sale, but to say, you know what, we're not aligned. In my head, every red flag's going off, so let's not enter into this. And I would also say a bit of life experience with handling people. I think when you're younger, less assertive, less experienced, you want the sale. So you might sell your soul a little bit to gain the sale, thinking that false economy of at least it's business.
Hmm.
And it's only with a bit of age you think you don't take you don't take business at any cost. Well, if you choose to do that, you do it with your eyes open.
Hmm.
A lot of this is handling people, and that's got a few scars in there.
This is the difference between sales and fit seeking. Because in sales, every sale is better than a no sale. Whatever you do to make a sale, that's better than ending up
Mm,
with a no sale. In fit seeking, in what you and I do and many other people, there's actually a thing as a bad sale. So some sales that
yeah,
you made,
yeah,
you would have been better off not making them. This is a major shift.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Let me just try to recap
Yep.
what we talked about today. Thank you for the early on story, because the quiet discounts are something that is very prevalent. You don't want to put yourself in a situation
Mm,
where
mm,
you basically should charge
mm,
but can't without
mm.
looking at professionals. The solution to that is better communication up front. And
Yes.
to know this, you have to go through situations where you didn't, right? But it's
Mm,
like in a story, you never really want to surprise the reader with a significant fact. You always want to pre-shadow it. And then we talked about the balancing act of integrity and desperation, and how
yeah,
that
absolutely.
affects us, and the shift toward more consultative work,
Yeah.
and how this ends up not being about costs anymore. So right
No,
now, most of your price is not about the fabric that you're going to pay to somebody or somebody else's work, right?
correct.
That's now based on value much more than
Mm,
the price, right? And finally, we talked about confidence, and this is similar for you and me, but it's also similar to basically any advice giving expert out there. Your price is a reflection of your confidence, and people can't tell your skill, they can just tell your confidence level through your price. And this is why it's not a good idea to say I'll be best but cheapest, because simply this is the internet and people are not going to believe you.
yeah. Well
Right.
done. Yeah, I think that's beautifully articulated. Mm.
Uh, Speaking of well articulated, where can people find you?
Oh, probably my website is finesseyourstyle.com or LinkedIn under my name, Jane Vandermeer.
I'll definitely share the links in the description. Jane, thank you for sharing the what I should have charged story. I think it's very relatable, and I'm very happy you came
Yeah.
here to say it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always an engaging and enriching discussion with you. You have such a wonderful perspective. And, you know, if we'd had a chat when I was first in business, I probably wouldn't have had all my war stories. I could probably fill a book on them. So it's wonderful the service that you're offering and how many people you will help and save such heartache, and heartache not just financial but all the emotional bruises that come through with your brilliant skill set. So thank you.
Thank you so much. But I like to say I had a client who was 25 at the time, and she said, "Oh, I wish I knew this when I was 20. I wish I knew this when I was 20." But I made all of these mistakes, and now I can talk about this because
Mm,
my scar
mm,
tissues are impressive.
yeah.
Jane, thank you very much. Dear listener, join us again for what I should have charged.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to hear more, simply subscribe. Until next time, your host, Filip Vojic.